There is a moment, and if you've ever been in a stadium when it happens, you know exactly what I'm talking about, where everything just stops. The air thickens. 50,000 people collectively hold their breath. And then, one single person on that stage does something so precise, so impossibly fluid, that your brain can't process whether what you just saw was real or whether you dreamed it. That moment happened in Mexico City, and the person who caused it was ParkJimin. Mexico City in May 2026 was already something extraordinary before a single note was played. BTS had not performed a full group concert in Mexico in nearly 11 years, not since a stop in July 2015, and the entire city seemed to vibrate with the weight of that absence finally ending. Fans have been camped outside Estadio GNP Seguros for days. The streets around the Iztacalco district had been painted purple by ARMY, who had turned the surrounding blocks into a festival that didn't need a ticket to attend. On the night of the first show on May 7th, approximately 150,000 people were accounted for across the three-night run, and the city's tourism numbers reportedly spiked 18% in a single week. Mexico was not just hosting a concert. Mexico was hosting a cultural event that people would still be talking about in 20 years. But even inside all of that spectacle, inside an event that had already been compared internationally to the arrival of the Beatles and Michael Jackson, those were not BTS fans making that comparison. Those were CNN commenters in their 60s who had been there for both. Even inside all of that, it was Jimin who stopped time. Let's talk about what actually happened, because the details matter enormously here. During the ARIRANG World Tour's Mexico City leg, Jimin performed his moonwalk. Not a reference to a moonwalk. Not a stylized nod to a moonwalk. An actual moonwalk, clean and controlled, executed mid-performance on one of the largest stages BTS has ever occupied on this tour. The crowd erupted. And the reason the crowd erupted is not simply because a moonwalk is impressive. It's because of what a moonwalk means, and because of who Jimin is as a dancer, and because of the conversation those two things start when you put them together in the same sentence. To understand why this moment landed the way it did, you have to understand what the moonwalk actually represents in the history of popular performance. When Michael Jackson performed the moonwalk for the first time on national television in 1983 during the Motown 25, yesterday, today, and forever special, it wasn't just a dance move. It was a declaration. It was proof that the human body could do things that seemed to violate physics, that a performer could move in a way that made your eyes disagree with your brain. The moonwalk became the single most iconic piece of choreography in the history of modern pop music, not because it was technically the most difficult thing any dancer had ever done, but because of the way it looked effortless, impossible, and entirely, completely, undeniably his. Jackson owned that movement. He turned the simple act of appearing to glide backward across a floor into a symbol of absolute creative authority. For decades after Jackson's death in 2009, the moonwalk became something that other performers referenced mostly as homage. It existed in the culture as a kind of monument, something you could point to, acknowledge, but never really touch without it feeling like imitation. Then came a generation of Korean performers who had grown up with Jackson, not as a distant legend, but as a living obsession, a reference point for what performance could actually be. BTS, in particular, have never hidden their debt to Jackson's legacy. The 2018 BTS Prom Party Festa, where Jimin and Jungkook performed a full tribute to Jackson's Black or White, is still one of the most discussed performance moments in BTS history precisely because of how deeply it demonstrated that these two understood what Jackson was actually doing. Not just the steps, but the intention behind them. Jimin, specifically, has always been the member most frequently compared to Jackson's ethos as a performer. Not because their styles are the same, they are quite different, but because of a quality they share that is genuinely rare, complete physical awareness. Jackson never moved accidentally. Every gesture, every pause, every isolated body part had a reason. Jimin operates from the same principle. When you watch him dance, you are watching a person who has so thoroughly internalized movement that his body becomes a second language, one he speaks more fluently than most dancers will in a lifetime. His training background is classical. He studied contemporary dance at Busan Arts High School before being cast by HYB, and that foundation gives his movement a quality that goes beyond K-pop choreography. His lines are long and deliberate. His transitions are smooth in a way that looks effortless, but requires extraordinary control. So when Jimin stepped into a moonwalk on that stage in Mexico City, it wasn't just a fan service moment. It wasn't a casual wink at the crowd. It was a trained, precise, intentional decision by a dancer who understood exactly what he was doing and exactly what it meant. The crowd's reaction, that roar, that specific kind of roar that happens when an audience collectively recognizes something as significant, was the sound of 50,000 people understanding in real time that they were watching something that deserved to exist in the same conversation as the moments it was referencing. ND then, before the Mexico City crowd had fully recovered from that, Jimin did something else. He performed the side flip from We Are Bulletproof PT2. If you are a longtime ARMY, you already know the weight of that sentence. If you are newer to BTS, let me explain why this particular moment has its own entire history, and why what happened in Mexico City was not just impressive, it was almost emotionally overwhelming for anyone who knew what they were looking at. The side flip in We Are Bulletproof PT2 is one of the most technically demanding live performance moves in BTS's entire catalog. The choreography requires Jimin to launch himself into the air in a lateral spin, a full rotation with no hands touching the floor, while J-Hope is positioned on the stage below him. The timing has to be exact. If J-Hope is not fully flat before Jimin launches, both of them risk serious injury. If Jimin's trajectory is even slightly off, his feet could land on J-Hope's head. This is not hyperbole. In old interviews and behind-the-scenes content, both members have spoken about the fear built into performing this move live. Jimin admitted he was scared of it. J-Hope admitted the trust it required was unlike anything else in their choreography. And the reason BTS kept performing it, night after night, year after year during their earlier tours, is because it was the kind of moment that reminded audiences what performance at the highest level actually costs. When BTS went on hiatus for military service, that move went away with them. There was no stage for it, no reason to practice something that dangerous for a performance schedule that didn't exist. 4 years, that side flip existed only in fancam archives and in the memory of fans who had been there to see it live. In Mexico City in May 2026, Jimin brought it back. Notably, the large stadium screen didn't catch it. The official camera coverage missed the moment entirely. What spread around the world in the hours after the concert was fancam footage, personal video taken by fans in the crowd. And the reaction to those videos tells you everything you need to know about what that moment meant. The clips exploded. Within hours, they were being shared across Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and fan forums in multiple languages, each post carrying the same collective astonishment. He still has it. Not just that he still has the physical capability, though that itself is remarkable. This is a move that demands elite-level athletic conditioning, and Jimin performed it exactly as he had a decade ago. More than the technical execution, what those videos captured was a performer making a deliberate choice to return to something that mattered, to dust off a piece of history, and present it to an audience that understood its significance. There is a version of the story where Jimin's moonwalk and side flip are just 2 cool moments in a 3-night concert run. And on the surface, that is technically accurate. But the surface is almost never where the interesting things are. What these 2 moments represent, when you place them side by side, is a performer making a conscious argument about continuity, about the line that runs from Michael Jackson's revolutionary physical intelligence to a generation of Korean artists who absorbed it, transformed it, and carried it forward into a new century. Jackson's legacy is not just in the moonwalk. It's in the understanding that a body in motion can carry meaning, that dance is not decoration for music but a co-equal form of expression, that the truest form of performance is one where every element, the sound, the movement, the silence, the stillness, is intentional. That understanding lives in Jimin. It was visible in 2018 at the Prom Party Festa. It was visible in the obsessive detail of face-era performances. And it was visible in Mexico City in 2026, in a moonwalk and a side flip, in front of 50,000 people who had been waiting 11 years for this. There's something else worth noting about the cowboy hat. After performing the side flip, after the crowd had erupted and the cameras had moved on to the next moment, Jimin found a young girl in the crowd who was crying. He took off the cowboy hat he had been wearing on stage, a piece of his costume, something he had been performing in all night, and he handed it to her. He told her not to cry. That's it. No grand gesture, no announcement, no pause to let the cameras capture it. He just gave her the hat and told her it was okay. Fans who were near enough to see it described the moment as quietly devastating in the best possible way, because it captured something that gets lost in all the discourse about legacy and influence and dance lineage and comparisons to Michael Jackson. Jimin is a dancer of extraordinary technical ability who understands the history of his craft and who makes deliberate artistic choices that operate on multiple levels simultaneously. All of that is true. And he is also just a person who noticed a crying kid in the front row and wanted to make her feel better. Jackson himself had that quality, the ability to shift from monument to human in a single breath, to make an audience of thousands feel like he was performing specifically for them. There is no technique class that teaches that. It is either there or it isn't. And this is the part that tends to get buried underneath all the superlatives and record-breaking statistics and streaming numbers, underneath the Forbes articles and the Spotify charts, and the sellout announcements and the presidential meetings. The thing that makes Jimin genuinely rare in the landscape of modern pop performance is not that he is technically elite, though he is. It is not that he has logged more hours in a practice room than most people will ever understand, though he has. It is that after all of that, after 13 years of training and performing and pushing his body to its absolute limits on some of the biggest stages in the world, he still does it like it matters. Every single night. Like the crowd in front of him is the only crowd that has ever existed. That is an almost impossible thing to sustain. Most performers, even great ones, develop a layer of distance over time. The show becomes the show. The muscle memory takes over, and the emotional investment becomes rationed, preserved, protected. It has to be. Performing at the level BTS operates, 3 nights in a row, stadium scale, full choreography, full vocal, it demands a kind of physical and emotional output that would hollow most people out within a week. The fact that Jimin can be 6 shows into a world tour and still notice a crying girl in the front row, still make the deliberate choice to pull off a side flip that his body has earned the right to retire, still step into a moonwalk that carries the full weight of what it references, that is not a performance technique. That is a character. It is also, if you zoom out far enough, exactly what made Michael Jackson irreplaceable. Jackson did not just understand that performance was a craft. He understood that performance was a responsibility to the moment, to the people in the room, to the history of every artist who came before and laid the groundwork for the stage you're standing on. Jimin operates with that same understanding. You can see it in how he prepares, how he carries himself in the hours before a show, how he speaks about dance not as something he does, but as something he is. In a 2024 interview, he described music and movement as inseparable, as 2 halves of a single language he has been learning his whole life. In Mexico City, he spoke that language with an accent so clear and precise that 50,000 native speakers heard it instantly and knew exactly what he was saying. In Mexico City, with the ARIRANG tour now 5 stops deep and the world watching, Jimin made the case again, the same case he has been making since 2013, in different languages and on different stages and with different choreography, but always the same essential argument. That great performance is not about impressing people. It is about reaching them. It is about creating a moment so precisely human that even a fan cam from the 42nd row captures it with enough clarity to make someone on the other side of the world feel like they were standing right there in the crowd. Mexico City felt it. The internet felt it. And anyone who has ever stood in a stadium when everything stops, when the air thickens and 50,000 people hold their breath, they know exactly what Jimin is. The next stop is Stanford Stadium in San Francisco. And if Mexico City is any indication, the world is not even remotely prepared for what is still coming.